Here we go. So we're Perashat Bo. We're going to study about Perashat Bo. As you know, I'm on vacation, so I'm a little dressed down today. I hope that's okay. A bit more casual than normal. Um, let's talk about the Makot. Let's talk about the Makot, the 10 Makot that took place in Egypt. This is something my father wrote a lot about, and I actually have an article coming out, hopefully in a few months, on the difference between the metaphysical approach to the world, which was the Greek approach to the world was metaphysical, and the semiological approach to the world, the Jewish approach to the world was semiological. So in Greek thinking, things, just one second. In Greek thinking, things just exist. They just are. And the existence of things allows for an objective and absolute reality. The metaphysical approach to the world was discussed by Aristotle, was discussed by Plato, was discussed by Socrates and many of the Greek philosophers. But the truth, the metaphysical approach to the world is what governs Western thinking today, in large part. Western thinking today is dominated by what is the nature of things, what is the essence of things. In contrast, there is a semiological approach to the world. The semiological approach to the world looks at the world as a type of writing. It is a written text. And who is the writer? The writer is actually HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that view of the world says it's not enough to know what things are or how things exist. That approach to the world says that it's also important to understand the meaning of things, right? So you have to know how to read. Not everybody knows how to read. Um, Even people who have a rudimentary knowledge of how to read words, they have a very primitive form of reading. And essentially, mentally speaking, and essentially, mentally speaking, a person can know how to read words and still be analphabetic, incapable of interacting with the text, incapable of interpreting things. He's told how to read. And if you're only told how to read, then you never know what to read. So the semiological view of the world, the Jewish view of the world, the view of the Hachamim, was that you can't just look at things in the world and be passive, but you have to try to understand these things. And the best example of this is the rabbinic adage that we say in the Agadah, um, where we take the first letter of each one of the plagues and we create this acronym. So you see the acronym here? Dasach, Adash, Be'ahav, right?
Rabbi, you're not sharing.
Yeah, okay. Let me share in this case. Thank you. Right. So you see here the word Dasach, Adash, Be'ahav, right? So you see the letter Daled. The letter Daled stands for the first plague, which was Dam, right? You see the letter Sadi. The letter Sadi stands for the second plague, which was Sephardea, and then finally Kaf for Kinim. So that's one word. You see, that's one word, Dasach. Then the second word, of course, is a continuation. Plague 4 through 6. Adash is Ain, Arov, Daled, Dever, Shin, Shechin. You see that? And finally, you have the Ahab. The Ahab, of course, is a third word. And this third word, or let's call it a title. I like the word title. This third title, right? This third title, Be'ahav, has a specific meaning, right? So you see how when the Makot happened in Misraim, we didn't just look at the Makot as they were, but we tried to give the makot meaning. What do they mean? So that has to do with the semiological view of the world. The semiological view of the world says, read the word like you would read a text. And here they literally, the Hachamim, literally took Rabbi Yehuda in this case, Rabbi Yehuda, the great Tana, Rabbi Yehuda, literally took the makot and he turned these makot into an actual written text, right? So that's based upon the semiological view of the world, which says when things happen, you must interpret those things as you would interpret a book. Okay? So what I would like to do today is to touch upon the meaning of dasach adash be'achav. What does that mean? What does it mean? For example, they took the first three letters, the first three makot, and they turned that into a word. They could have taken the first two makot and turned that into a word, right? They didn't have to do it 3, 3, and 4. They could have done it 2, 5, and 3. They could have done it, 5, 2, and right. I mean, it didn't have to 5, 2, and 3. It didn't have to be in this. They broke it down this way. They specifically broke it down this way. So by breaking it down this way, what they're actually saying is that there is meaning here, and you should read it this way. So they're telling us how to read it because not everybody knows how to read well. So the Hachamim are telling us here is how to read these makot. Okay, so again, the metaphysical view of the world will never want to read that. That would not interest them. They would never be looking for meaning. But we are Jewish, we the Jewish people, we always look for this type of meaning. So I tonight will give you my thoughts about this. And let me begin by telling you that the parasha that we're going to be reading on Shabbat is Parashat Bo. And Parashat Bo begins by relating to us the 8th plague. The first 7 plagues were related previously in the previous parasha. So a few comments. First, the plagues are very well organized. They are not random. And as you see, as we saw from Rabbi Yehuda, there are actually 3 titles to the plague. And each title has a specific message, right? And that's what we say in the Haggadah. That's what we actually say in the Haggadah. Why do we say it in the Haggadah? Because during the night of Pesach, we're supposed to engage in a discussion of what took place. And part of engaging in that discussion is to think about what did the makot and what they meant. And the Hebrew word for makot, we use the word otot. The word otot means letters. So if you have letters, you put them together. You read a word. We're experts at that. There's a great story of Daniel when there was a writing on the wall in the 5th chapter of the book of Daniel, right? And nobody knew how to read the writing. Belshazzar brought all of the wise men of his kingdom, all of the astrologers, all of the sorcerers. Everybody came into the palace. They were looking at the wall. Nobody knew how to read the wall until comes Daniel, and he knew how to decode. He knew how to decode the message on the wall. The Hachamim said that the message on the wall was written in some sort of code, and nobody knew how to decode it. So the Jews are experts at reading. So that let's look at the first plague of every title. There's a relationship. In the first plague of every title, God tells Moshe Rabbeinu the following words: Lech el Paro. Go personally to Paro. Now, what does it mean, Lech el Paro? So, and this happens in Makat Dam, the Daled of Dasach. The first letter of the first title is Daled, Dasach. This happens in Makat Arob. The first, the first letter of the second title is Arob. And this happens in Be'acha. This happens in Barad, in Hail. In each one of those 3 cases, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Lech el Paro. Go to him personally. So what does that mean? So the warning that precedes the plague happens at a very unique moment. It happens when Paro is in the river. Interesting. Paro is in the river and he is all by himself. His ministers are not there, his wives are not there. He's alone. And of course, we're not allowed to speak in a disrespectful manner. So I don't mean this in a disrespectful manner, so please don't take it like that. But in Egyptian mythology, the pharaoh was considered some sort of incarnation of God. By the way, that's where the Christians got the idea that a human being can be an incarnation of God, namely Yamach Shemo V'Zichro, Yeshu was the incarnation of God. That's actually a very ancient, it's a very ancient pagan idea. Now, here's the thing. The Pharaoh is the incarnation of God, and therefore he is not supposed to have a bowel movement. He's a God. I should say, as long as I mentioned Christianity, in Christian theology, there was a dispute among the theologians. The dispute centered around whether the baby Jesus needed diapers or he didn't need diapers. This is an actual theological dispute. I'm sorry to tell you, I don't know how the mahloket was resolved, but it is a dispute that takes place. But in the case of Egypt, in Egyptian mythology, there was no dispute. Pharaoh did not have any of that, right? Now you understand, by the way, why the Chachamim treated Christianity as idolatry for this reason, because many of the ideas in Christianity are actually taken from the ancient pagan idolatrous mythologies. You see that? You understand? So that's why we treat the Christian religion like Avodah Zarah. For example, we don't treat Islam like Avodah Zarah because it doesn't have Avodah Zarah. If it did, we wouldn't be embarrassed. We would say it's Avodah Zarah, but actually it doesn't. It has things that we don't believe in, that we disagree with, that are certainly improper, especially among the extremists. But it's not Avodah Zarah. That's the point. So, what would Paro do? Well, okay, so there was no, restroom in the palace. That would be kind of like sacrilegious. So every day in the morning, Paro would wake up early. He would enter the river, and he would, discharge himself. Hold on one second. Right. This happened every morning. Every morning he had to do this secretly because nobody was allowed to know what was really happening, right? So it was a secret. And it was at that moment that Pharaoh was in the river relieving himself. It was at that moment that Moshe Rabbeinu would come to Paro and he would tell him, here is what's going to happen, right? In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu was essentially telling Paro, between me and you, we don't have to calm each other. We don't have to pretend. I know that you're not a god, right? We don't have to tell anybody. Leave this between us, but I'm giving you an opportunity at the level of a gentleman to just concede defeat and let the Jewish people leave Egypt. So that's the first letter of every one of these titles. That's Dasach, Dam, this happened this way. Adash, Ain, Arov, the multitude of animals, it happened that way. And finally, Be'ahab. Be'ahab was Barad. In Barad, it happened that way. But if Paro wouldn't listen, and as you all know, Paro didn't listen, then there was an escalation. And the escalation, the second letter of each one of these words or titles starts the name of the Makkah. Each one of those cases, the word is Bo el Paro. So for example, this week's Perashah starts with the word Bo, because it's referring to the second plague in the third cycle. So in the second plague of the first cycle, Sephardea, Hashem tells to Moshe, Bo. In the second plague of the second cycle, Dever, Hashem tells to Moshe, Bo. And in this week's Parashah, which is the second plague of the third title, namely the Arbe, Hashem again tells to Moshe Rabbeinu, Bo. So you see the way that works? You understand that? You see the very interesting, the relationship. Very, very, what the Rabbi Yehuda says is really, it's a peshat. It's not just, that he took together some letters and he jumbled them together. No, he was saying something very precise about the nature of the makot. So Bo, this week's parasha starts with Bo. What does that mean? It means enter his palace. This is now done in the presence of Paro's ministers, in the presence of his wise men, and in the public. And in this case, it's not Moshe coming to Paro as a person to person at the personal level, but here Moshe is coming to Paro as a head of state. So that's Bo. What's the logic? So I think the logic, I explained it. First, God gives Paro an opportunity, an easy way out. Let's just make it simple. We don't have to embarrass you, right? Human to human. I know you're a human being. I know what you're doing here in the Nile River. It's clear to me. We don't have to tell anybody. It could be our secret, but just give it up because you're going to lose. But if you don't want to do it in the easy way, then I will address you as a head of state. And if I address you as a head of state, the entire country is going to find out what happened and what a debacle you're making of things. But then comes the third letter. The third letter of each one of these three words is where Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, don't give him a warning. Just do it. Don't warn Paro. He had two warnings. We gave him the opportunity. We don't have to give him a third warning. So starting with the first word, dasach, the third letter is kaf, kinim. In the case of the lice, there was no warning given to Paro. The second word, adash, the third letter is shin, shechin. Shechin are the boils on the skin. In the case of the boils on the skin, there is no warning to Paro. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe and Aharon, they do what they do. And in the third word, be'ahav, the third letter is het, choshech, darkness. There's no warning. They just bring the darkness on Egypt. You see that? Really, really fascinating. I learned this from my father, alav shalom. He taught this, and it always fascinated me. I have to say, it always intrigued me because it's very easy to read the makot and not to be aware of the internal structure that's taking place. And again, it's not random. It's not a haphazard. Everything is very well. Everything is very well organized. Okay. So let's continue understanding it a little more deeply, because as I told you, before I teach you how to interpret the makot, I wanted to give you the structure of the makot. So now you all see the structure very clearly, correct? It's also when we study Gemara. When you study Gemara in the correct way, you first learn the structure of the sugya, and then once you understand the structure, then you can understand the meaning of the sugya, right? So that's very interesting that it's like that. Okay, let's continue now in understanding now the meaning of these words. So let's look at the first title. Okay, dasach. The first plague is blood, right? And in this plague, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Bezot teda she'ani Adonai. He says, now you're going to know that I am God, that I govern the world. He also says that in the first letter of the second title, namely in Arov, Adash, Arov, the first letter of the second title, he says the same thing. Now you are going to know that I govern the world. I am the governor of the world, Ani Amonai. He also says that in the first letter of the third title, Bezot Tera Ki Ani Amonai. So you see again, you see the relationship? Barad, in the case of hail, he says, now you are going to know that I govern the world, right? So let's see why. So in the case of Dam, the Egyptians believed that the Nile was one of the most powerful gods. They believed in many gods, but the Nile was one of the powerful gods. And here the Nile is turning all bloody. So it's God's way, Hashem's way of showing the Egyptians your God is worthless. I can turn it into blood, right? Instead of the Nile being a source of fertility and life, it becomes the very embodiment of death, right? So that's Bezot Teda. Now you will know that I am God, right? Similarly, in the first letter of the second title, Arob. Arob is a mixture of animals that invade the cities. So in Egyptian mythology, there was a belief that there were special gods that protected Egypt from the wild animals. So God let these wild animals into Egypt, hence demonstrating that these special gods are completely meaningless. No, they don't protect Egypt. And here I'm bringing the wild animals into Egypt. So that's, again, Bezot Teda Ki Ani Hashem. And this way you will know that I am God. The first letter of the third title, of the third word, Barad, Be'ahab, right? Be'ahav, the Barad comes from the heavens. And the heavens were considered, also in the Greek world, you had the physical world, which is the world that we inhabit, and you had the metaphysical world, which was a special world, which is above our world. So in pagan thinking as well, you have the regular world, which is the world we inhabit, and then you have the heavens, which are the realms of the various gods that are in the heavens. And who controls these realms? Who controls the gods in the heavens? Well, they're there. They exist. So God says, Barad, I'm not going to bring fire and snow mixed in from the heavens to show you that these gods do not control the heavens. I do. And there's no logic to hail, fire and hail, meaning ice and hail, sort of mixed in together. There's no logic to that. At least from the way the Egyptians perceived it. So again, God is saying, Bezot Teda, and now you will know that I am God, that I control, that I govern all. So you see the way the first letter of each one of these makot, each one of these titles, each one of these words, the first letter of each one of these words is a further demonstration of the principle that God governs his universe, not the Egyptian gods. Okay. Let's go back now to the word dasach. Okay. What does that word mean as a word? Because the word itself has meaning. So what does the
Is that
word
how
mean?
it's pronounced? Datsach?
Dasach, yes.
Not Detzach?
No, we always said it dasach, adash, be'ahab.
Okay.
That's always the way we said it in my house.
Thank
Yeah,
Can I ask one side question?
go ahead.
I was always intrigued how Moshe Rabbeinu actually had the platform to speak to Paro in this way. Threats, warnings. It's a little hard for me to grasp that he was coming. Obviously he was inside at one point, but he was an outsider. He didn't have a major entourage, security, whatever. And here he is making demands of Paro, the leader clearly in that region. Do you have any insight on that? How that worked? And
Yeah, that's a good question. Somebody just asked me the other week. I think somebody asked me that in Knis. So first of all, the Torah doesn't tell us anything about that. it's pretty silent on that point.
Right.
My father, in one of his books, he distinguishes between, and I think this is part of it, he distinguishes between tyrants and dictators. Dictators, they rule by sheer brutal force, right? And the people, the subjects of the dictator, they know that they are being ruled by sheer brutal force. Um, North Korea, for example. North Korea, the people are terrified of the North Korean dictator. I mean, there's a sick pathological phenomenon going on there, in that, in so much as sometimes when people are abused by someone repeatedly, they also love the person who's abusing them, but it doesn't make the abuse less or the terror less. A person can be chas v'shalom, shalom nida, a wife can be, and God forbid, I don't even like talking about it, can be abused by the husband, and she still loves him, and it becomes a tormenting type of feeling. Those are dictators. That's what dictators do. Tyrants, they're incredible speakers. They have charisma. The people are enchanted by the tyrant. A great example of a tyrant is Hitler, Yimach Shemo V'zichro. He was a tyrant. He was voted into office. He used emergency powers. We have executive order in the United States. He used it, similar to the executive order. He used emergency powers in Germany to do what he wanted to do. Shows you, by the way, that you can have a democracy where people go crazy. If people go crazy, then the democracy no longer works, does it? Excuse me just for one moment. Right. So, nevertheless, the tyrant, as my father explained, is a person who charms the people. So, for example, Stalin. Stalin was probably one of the ruthless human beings to ever rule a country. Maybe, I don't want to say in history. I don't know history that well, but I mean, he killed tens of millions of Russians. I mean, tens of millions. I mean, he killed so many Russians, and it was done so secretly that we don't even know if it was 30 million, if it was 50 million. Um, and it was a brutal type of death. I mean, there was the northernmost town in the world in Siberia, one of the coldest towns in the world in Siberia, has a road called the Road of Death, I forgot if the road is called. And the reason it's called the Road of Death is because they used to use the prisoners in Siberia to build the road, and they would just die. As they were building the road, they would freeze to death, and they would bring more people to freeze to death, and more people. And eventually, I don't know how many million, I mean, did you need 100,000 people to die? Probably needed 1 million people to die to build that road. The road is there today in Siberia. Now, when Stalin died, there was an incredible explosion of sadness and mourning in Russia. It was like God, in the view of the Russians, God literally died for them. They loved Stalin, right? They loved him. They couldn't bear the fact that he died. It was just not possible that he could die, right? So he was a tyrant. He wasn't a dictator. He was a tyrant, right? So my father considered Paro to be a tyrant. Now, if you're a tyrant, you can't just go around, with a gun, and every time somebody says something you don't like, you blow his brains out. That may not look good on Fox News. I don't know if CNN would even report it. CNN would probably not report it, but at least on Fox News or Newsmax, it wouldn't look good if he blew his brains out. So the tyrant doesn't want to do that. The tyrant doesn't want to play that game, because if the tyrant plays that game, he would lose his charm and charisma. He may have somebody else kill the guy. That's okay. Maybe he'll have his Mendele kill the guy later on. That's fine. Okay. But you can't kill the guy yourself. And it's just too obvious. So a guy like Moses entering the palace on behalf of the Jewish people, it would be too simple for Pharaoh to kill him. And he wouldn't want to kill him, because then he would lose. Pharaoh believes in himself. He knows that he's the great tyrant. As the Chachamim said, the cosmocrator, they refer to him as a cosmocrator, that he ruled many nations. So he doesn't have to kill Moshe. Why would he have to do that? If he has to kill Moshe, that means he's giving him credence. So I think that's part of the psychology.
Very, very nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at the first word, dasach. The first word, dasach, daled dam, sadi sephardea, kaf kinim. So there are things we take for granted. Um, one of the things we take for granted, the Egyptians were very blessed. They really were. They were incredibly blessed. They didn't need rainwater. They had everything in the Nile. The Nile was a source of fresh drinking water for every Egyptian. And you take it for granted. You can't survive without water. One of the reasons that bars were very um, popular in Europe in the Middle Ages and even later is because there was no running water. People would go to bars to drink because that's where they would get their drink, literally. So water is something we take for granted here in the Western world. We think, oh, we have water. So Hashem, the first thing he does is he turns um, the Nile, the water, into blood. Don't take it for granted. Next thing, Sephardea, part of the same word. My father, based upon Abarbanel, but also based upon the Geonim, explain. I know the common explanation that we all know, Sephardea, frogs. Rashi brings both explanations, by the way. Rashi brings Sephardea as frogs, and he also brings Sephardea as the crocodiles. Right. My father favored the crocodile over the frog because it just makes sense. The crocodile is, I mean, I'm not saying that a frog will be a pleasant experience, but the crocodiles are a far less pleasant experience, right? You can all understand that. Now, the point of the crocodiles is there's an ecology in the world. There's a balance between all the animals in the world. So if you ever study ecology, you see how if you take one particular organism out of an ecological system, the whole ecological system collapses. And this balance is all over the place. There's a balance in the atmosphere, in the way the storm systems develop, and there's various systems in the atmosphere and in the ocean that together create the weather we have. We take this all for granted, right? So there's a balance, and we don't understand this balance, or we don't appreciate this balance. So imagine what would happen if the animals start to misbehave. So think about the Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds. Man, I must be old. Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds, right? The birds, the birds start going crazy, right? And they attack people. Well, why not? Well, why can't that be? Right? So the answer is Hashem organizes this balance in the world, and the birds don't generally attack people. I go running by the beach, especially in the wintertime. There's tons of seagulls on the sand because during the summer you have people there. So the seagulls don't all congregate there. But in the winter, there's no people there. So there's tons of seagulls. And then, as I run and I get to the flock of seagulls, they're all standing there. They all start running away. And I'm like, it's so interesting to me that they're running away, because if they wanted to attack me, man, I would be running faster than they are, because it's like, there's hundreds of them and they're big birds. I mean, they start pecking away at like, really, like, you're scared of me. I mean, but they are scared of me, and I'm happy it's like that. I thank Hashem for that. But that's like Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds. Why should it be like that? So the answer is Hashem creates this balance in the world, and we take it for granted. And if one of the animals, the crocodile, decides, hey, there's not a lot of good fish in the Nile River, why the heck make the effort? Let me go to the houses. That place has a lot of good food. Oh, well, why not? Why don't they do that? What's stopping them? So that's a second makah. So you see the relationship between dam, you take the water for granted. Sephardea, you take this beautiful balance for granted. And finally, the thing we take for granted the most is our bodies. Our bodies are very comfortable. You think the ecology of the world is complex? I mean, the ecology of the body is something that's mind-blowing. It's just incredible, all the different intricate systems within our body that allow us to exist comfortably. Think of the trillions, not millions and not billions, trillions of bacteria in our gut. and these trillions of bacteria in our gut, they affect our entire, um, uh, they actually affect our mind. I mean, not just, obviously they affect our ability to digest
Oh, no,
and the body
completely.
reacts. I'm sorry?
Completely. They control so many things that we're not even aware of. Our
Completely. Now,
Yeah.
why are they there? I mean, they could have been terrible. They could have been bad bacteria. They could have been messed up things. You know, why is it like that? Why is everything so perfectly organized in the body? I mean, I have to say, by the way, that I found the theory of evolution to be such a primitive, unintelligent, I don't want to use any bad words. I could have used, right? That one day humanity is going to look back at what Darwin did and humanity is going to be embarrassed of itself. I mean, this all came by coincidence. I mean, I think you have to be, I really believe that if people don't believe in God, there's something fundamentally wrong with their intellect. I mean, at the level of prefrontal cortex being severely damaged. I don't think anybody who has a functional prefrontal cortex cannot understand that the human body in its incredible, simply incredible functioning power, in the way all these systems within systems, with large systems, smaller systems, cellular systems within the cells, to think that this all just came by coincidence is just an insult to human intelligence. It really is. And it shows how the politicians, they manipulate humanity. The politicians make us stupid. The politicians have an agenda. They want us to believe in things, and we all fall for it. We all fall for the con, and it's global. There's a global con going on by the political leadership. The political leaderships are just marionettes. They're acting on behalf of the powerful families in the world that fund their political campaigns and tell them, here's what we would like you to do. And the reason they want to, here's what we would like you to do is because they want to become richer and they want everybody else to become poor. So this is the way the world works. One day, maybe I'll give a class on that or a series of classes on that. We're not there yet, but I'm letting you know that the political leadership is there not to help us. They are there to hurt us, to cause us to be slaves, to enslave us, and to make us fundamentally stupid, because no intelligent person would want to be a slave. This is exactly what happened in Misraim. Egypt was called the Bet Avadim. It wasn't called the Bet Abdut, a place where there was slavery. No, it was a Bet Avadim. It was a place of slaves because everybody in Egypt were slaves to the tyrant. That's what tyrants do. They speak beautifully. They use great language, democracy. I don't know, whatever. They'll keep using different words, but the goal is always the same: to enslave the masses, to make the masses destitute. Why do you want to make the masses destitute? Because then the masses rely on the politicians to help them survive. That's the definition of a slave. And now we control the world. We control these slaves. We control the nations of the world. That's why it's so important. This idea of globalism is so important. Why would anybody want globalism? I mean, if I'm an American, I want America. If I'm an Italian, I want Italy, and God bless them for that. And if I'm a Swede, I want Sweden. Where does this idea of globalism come from? It comes from that. They want to do what Nimrod did. They want to build a global community so they can control the entire global community. They're not satisfied with oppressing the people in their nations. They want to oppress all of the human race. So that's the stupidity of the masses, which comes from the evil leadership that inculcates the masses to believe in stupidity. That's fundamental. I mean, just to give you an example, today a child in school has a right, without the parents' knowledge, to tell the administrators in the school, I want to get, let's say, a female can say, I want to get male hormones. I want to start getting male hormones. I'm interested in becoming a boy, and the schools can do this to the child without even telling the parents. I mean, if people accept this, and they do accept it as they do, it means that society has gone completely mad. Well, how can society go completely mad? Don't we have any critical judgment? The answer is no. The political establishment has denuded the people of political judgment by making them dumb. That's a simple truth. So getting back to the beauty of the human body, and that the human body is a great testament to the existence of God. That's why when anytime you leave the bathroom, you say, Asher yasarei ta'adam b'chokhmah. I see the wisdom of God in the human body. How can you not see that wisdom, right? But then the human body can become completely messed up. Lice. Suddenly the whole body becomes filled with lice, right? What happened? Now you're completely and utterly uncomfortable, right? You don't know what to do with yourself because you're suffering. Well, you take it all for granted, don't you? So you take the water in the Nile for granted. You take the beautiful balance in the world, in ecology for granted. You take the balance in your body for granted. Dasach. That's the meaning of the first word. Now you know how to word how that word should be read. It's telling you here's how to read the word. It's not an exclusive reading, but I think it's a brilliant reading of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, let's go on now. Let's go on now to the second word. The second title is Adash. Adash, it also has a meaning. And here it is. Arov. Arov was a pack of wild animals. And the Torah tells us in this case, and the Egyptians saw it, that the wild animals did not enter the land of Goshen. Again, the wild animals, suddenly they leave the jungle, they enter all of Egypt. But here's the extra thing that happens that didn't happen prior. Everybody saw how the wild animals were not entering the land of Goshen. Now, from the perspective of nature, there's no difference between the land of Goshen, where the Jews are, and the rest of Egypt, right? There was no special, thing about the Jew at the natural. I mean, I'm talking about the physical level, why the animals will not enter the land of Goshen, but they enter the rest of Egypt. So that distinction, there's a distinction. There's a special divine providence, a special protection that Hashem has for the Jewish people. That's a ayin. Very similar. Dever. Dever was a type of sickness where the livestock of the Egyptians became terribly sick and died. And again, the Torah emphasizes how the Jewish livestock was not touched by this, whatever it was, plague, COVID-19 for animals, whatever it was. The Jewish animals were not touched by that, right? So that's, again, same message. There's a special protection for Am Yisrael. And finally, the Sheen, the Shechin, very similar thing, where they took the ashes from the fire, from the smoldering from the fire that was out, right? After the fire goes out, you have ashes, and these ashes infected the Egyptians with terrible boils, terrible skin infection, and this didn't touch the Jews. Again, there was a haflaya, there was a clear boundary in these three plagues between the Egyptians and the Jews. The Egyptians are all suffering, and they all see that the Jews are not being touched by this. And why would that be? Because a bacterial infection that affects the animals, that infects the people, hordes of wild animals going through the streets, they shouldn't distinguish between Jews and Gentiles, but they did. So that's a second message. This is what we say every Saturday night in the Havdalah, Hamavdil min Kodesh lechol, uben or lechoshech, uben Yisrael la'amim. God distinguishes between the holy and the unholy, between the light and the dark, and between the Jewish people and the rest of the nation. So that's the meaning of the word Adash. Adash teaches us that lesson. Okay, and finally, you have the third word, the third title, Be'ahav. Be'ahav has to do with history. Nobody gets away with anything. nations do not get away with anything. They don't. In the case of Barad, the first letter was Barad, hail. Um, you know that Joseph made an incredible contribution to the Egyptians because, when he came to Paro and he suggested to Paro, well, why not just save the grains during the 7 bountiful years, save those grains for the 7 years of famine. So it wasn't so simple. It wasn't so simple because in antiquity, people didn't know how to store grain. If you stored grain, it became rotten or it got eaten by rats, right? Or it got fungus. There was no technological knowledge or techniques on how to properly store grain. And Joseph is the one who invented these huge silos in Egypt, and he developed the technique for grain storage. That's not just a contribution to Egypt, by the way, that's a contribution to all of humanity. Um, so they should have been appreciative of what the Jews did. Um, and the barad was because they were kefuye toba. They were not acting properly to somebody. If somebody does something good to you and you don't acknowledge the good by acting properly to that person, that's called kafui tova. Kafui tova means instead of saying thank you, you you attack the person, or you know you hurt the person. Kafui tova. So the Egyptians were kefuye tova. They took the Jewish genius and they used it to create these huge silos where they can have food, plenty of food. And what does Hashem do in Barad? He destroys the trees, he destroys the vegetation. My father used to teach, when he used to teach this, he used to say that the Barad, the hail, also destroyed the silos. It physically destroyed those very silos built by Yosef for the grain storage. But the important thing is that the Barad explicitly, it is in the Torah, explicitly that it destroyed the vegetation, but it only destroyed the hard vegetation because like the barley comes out first in the wheat in the Middle East, in Israel, and also in Egypt. The barley comes out first. And when the barley is fully grown, it's hard. So if there's a hailstorm, it will destroy the barley because it's hard. So the hail hits the barley and it crushes it, right? But the wheat was soft because it was still very young. So the hail didn't destroy it, because when you have something hard hitting something soft, it bends it over, but it doesn't destroy it, right? So the hail was a good warning. It was like, guys, you're not acknowledging what the Jews did for you. I'm going to take away your food. I'm going to take away your vegetation. So it first destroys the barley and that type of vegetation. But then later on, they refused to let the Jewish people go. What was the next Makkah? And this is how this week's parasha starts. Arabeh.
Arbe.
Arabeh. What does the Arabeh do? The Arabeh devours
Leftover.
exactly anything that was green and soft and young when the Barat came. Now comes the Arbe. The Arbe doesn't say, oh, this is green and soft, I'm not going to eat it. They eat everything. They're very hungry, right? Mm-hmm. So the Arbe comes and it completely eradicates all of the food in the fields in Egypt. There's nothing left, right? The Arbe was crazy. It was a crazy Arbe. It entered every place and ate everything. All right. And then finally, there was a Hoshech, the third letter of this third word. And you see what this third word is about. This third word is about, you don't acknowledge the Jewish people, your kefuya tova, here's what I'm going to do to you. So the third makkah, the third letter of this third word is choshech, darkness. So the Chachamim teach us that the Jews, they would have to wake up early, even before dawn, when it was still dark outside, and they had to work in the pitch black. And similarly, they would be done working when it was pitch black outside, when it was dark outside, right? Choshech. So Hashem is giving the Egyptians a taste of what it feels like to be in the Choshech, because they forced the Jews to exist in the Choshech. That's one of the explanations. I like my explanation even more. My explanation is that wherever the Jews are, they bring with them wisdom. They bring with them a special light. I absolutely guarantee you that if the Jews ever decided to leave America, if the crazies ever took over or real crazy things, and the Jews decided to leave America, I guarantee you
It would fall.
America will fall, and without the Jews, it will not come back. Spain was an empire. Spain was the most powerful country in Europe. And when they kicked the Jews out, it became a third world, nothing country. I mean, nobody, Spain, like
Turkey also.
I'm sorry?
Turkey.
Yeah. Turkey was the Ottoman Empire, was very good to the Jews.
Ottoman Empire, yeah.
I don't believe they ever kicked the Jews out. If I could be mistaken, I don't think there was ever an expulsion. But in Spain, there was an
It
expulsion.
wasn't like an expulsion, but they didn't make it easy for them, if I remember. Your
Okay.
father said.
Okay.
If I remember, I could be wrong.
Okay. Not sure, but Spain definitely, that we can agree on. Spain, yes. Portugal, yes. That's why recently, not so long ago, not so many years ago, Spain and Portugal tried to have this thing, I think Portugal, if I'm not mistaken, where they want to give Jewish citizenship to Jews to return to Portugal. I mean, what? Like, why would I want to do that? Like, I mean, what does Portugal have? I'm not trying to be mean. I mean, I'm sure it's a nice place to visit on vacation, and they have this place called Nazaré where they have amazing surfing. The craziest surfing in the world is in Nazaré. They have these crazy waves, 80 feet, 90, 100 feet, and they have people surfing those waves. But I don't want to live there for that. I can see that on YouTube, right? So I can watch the waves on YouTube. I don't have to live. Why would anybody want to move to Portugal or move back to Spain? Like, for what? You understand my point? But that's what they want. They want the Jews to come back, because I guess they realized that they made a mistake. It only took them about how many years to figure it out? Over 500 years. I mean, So I think most Jews are saying thanks, but no thanks. But I'm sure there's a few out there who who have taken advantage of that, and no problem with that. That's fine. Wherever they want to live is fine. So that's darkness. The darkness is, without the Jews, Egypt will become a dark place, right? So again, the third thing is Be'ahav. The third word has 4 letters. The 4th letter is Bechorot, Makat Bechorot. And that's God telling to the Egyptians, what, you think you can just kill the Jewish babies and that's it? It's like, it's done, it's over. What's done is done, and let's go forward. Let's have peace. Let's have, whatever. Let's all sing the Horah together. Is that what you think? Well, it doesn't work like that. The fact is that you did kill the Jewish babies, and Hashem saw it, and Hashem judged it, and now you're gonna have to pay for what you did. That's Makat Bechorot. In Makat Bechorot, Hashem tells him, I'm paying you back for what you did to the Jewish children. I'm going to kill your children. By the way, I have to tell you, I know maybe this is going to sound extremist, but then again, I probably sounded extreme in the earlier part of the class. So it's not like I'm going to do any more damage by saying this next extreme statement. I really don't think that Germany got payback for what they did to the Jews in the Holocaust. I don't think that Europe got payback for what Europe did to the Jews in the Holocaust. I really don't. I think that they lost World War II, and it was devastating and all that. I just don't think that the payback for the Holocaust took place. That's my opinion. You're free to disagree or agree, but I know that in history, no crime goes unnoticed and no evil deed goes unpunished,
Unpunished.
right? No evil deed goes
Wow.
unpunished. So, again, I have nothing against Germany. Chas v'shalom. I have nothing against them. I have nothing against the French. I have nothing against anybody. I really don't. But I'm just looking at history and I see the way things work. And what happened in the Holocaust was so horrible and inhuman and unnatural and sick and perverted that I personally am of the opinion that it won't just go away. That's all. But that's Makat Becholot. And now we know what the third word means. The third word, Be'ahav, means that when the Jews are in your country, they contribute certain things. And if you don't recognize these contributions, and if furthermore you oppress and persecute the Jews, there will be consequences. I don't know if any of you remember, but I remember that back in December and November and December, they were beginning to persecute Jews in the streets of New York. It became very common to beat up Jews. Right?
Absolutely. Right before COVID.
Interesting that it happened right before COVID, isn't that? Right? So they began to beat up Jews and the authorities weren't doing anything.
No.
We have to be politically correct. We don't want to, God forbid, offend anybody. I mean, if somebody, punches a Jew, or beats up a Jew or harasses a Jew, I mean, we have to understand that, right? I mean, the implicit message is that anti-Semitism is correct. That's the implicit message. Because if God forbid, chas v'shalom, we should never ever do this. But let's say, God forbid, people were persecuting blacks and beating up blacks on the streets. I don't think that the authorities would just say, oh, it's okay. We have to understand them. No, they wouldn't. They would do something immediately, right? I think we could all agree on that. So similarly, when they were persecuting Jews, that wasn't happening. What's the message? The message is blacks are people, and they are people. They are people, but Jews are not people. They don't deserve the same protection that blacks deserve. That's a simple truth. What came right after that, Nathan? What were you mentioning that right after that came? How did all this persecution suddenly disappear?
Oh, the virus. The minute the virus started, that's it. Everything, But right until that thing in Newark happened 4 weeks before COVID.
There was a thing in Newark. There was a thing in Muncie. There was every day on the streets of Brooklyn, there were things happening. They just wouldn't tell you about it, right?
Right.
So let's be real. What happened again? COVID. Okay, suddenly all these people are locked in, and now they were rioting outside. They weren't beating up Jews. They were beating up other people. Because when it's okay to beat up Jews, you send a message. Violence is okay. I see. So you see, everything comes together. Everything makes sense at the end. You just have to know how to read things properly. It's a terrible message because violence is not okay, not for Jews, not for anybody. I don't want to mention skin color because it's irrelevant. Skin color just doesn't matter. Violence is not okay, but nevertheless. So you see the connection? So that's what happened. And that's Be'ahav. When you read the word Be'ahav, you know how to view things intelligently. Nevertheless, that's it for now because it's 9:30. I enjoyed teaching this class. If you have any questions, I'll take them. And otherwise, I'm going to wish you all a good thing. Mr. Lopez, I see you're in the Bet Knesset, dressed up beautifully. It's inspiring to see that. I like that. It really is. I like that. Talmud Torah in the Bet Knesset.
Thank you.
Very, very nice. Hazaku Baruch.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any she'elot? Okay. So Beli Neder next week. For the last month, I had like a laryngitis that was coming on and off. I hope it's a little better and I hope that I can do this on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. Be'ezrat Hashem.
Amen.
Bezrat Hashem. Zakbar, Rabbi. Thank you. Super.
Take care, Mikey.
Thank you, Rabbi. Beautiful.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you so
Take
much.
care, man.
Shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Mevorach.
Great, great.
Amen. Thank you.